Welcome all of you, the viewers of Daily Culture. My name is Marek Zmysłowski, and today we're talking about private cities. With us in the studio is Marek Zmysłowski, a CEO of Samana Group.
Thank you for having me.
And Marek, you are actually a businessman, and you have this fantastic and also sort of crazy idea of building a private city in Samana in Dominicana. And it is a Polish project because you're Polish, and I would say it's an international project, but with Polish origins. Let's say like this. And you want us to build this beautiful garden. I would say paradise city, private city in Dominicana, with a beautiful buildings and sort of start a society from the scratch, from the beginning. So tell us about the main idea of this project. Why a private city and why there?
Yeah, so the concept of private city does seem a little bit crazy, especially in Europe though, because if you think about it, we're simply building a real estate project, which is big enough that can afford to have its own infrastructure, including shopping malls, sports centers, hospitals, and so on. When you look at the rest of the world outside Europe, private cities are actually a thing, and they're quite popular. There's more than 20 of them just in the North and South America, and there's also a few of them in Asia. The world we live in now is allowing us to work more and more remotely. We become more and more conscious. We realize that living in the concrete jungle is not necessarily healthy. And if you work in those big concrete jungles, from time to time, we would love to have our getaway, our second home in a jungle.
Well, especially, for example, in such countries as Poland or other very dark North countries.
Or basically
United
any
States,
developed country.
Exactly, when we are so much closed inside, indoors.
Yeah.
And here we offer something outdoor.
It's totally outdoor, right? But the business model is not that crazy. You can think about a cruise ship for a few thousand passengers. It's just basically on the ground. But the business model where you have to take care of everything, the lifestyle, the entertainment, the place for work, food, sports, and so on, within a confined space. Well, not as confined as a ship, but on a few thousand hectares or a few thousand acres. The business model is not that weird. We just have to maybe open our mind sometimes that we don't really require government to clean our streets. Or sell us the electricity. We can do this using a private company.
On your own.
Yeah.
So you're sort of libertarian in some aspects.
It probably signs up more on the libertarian aspect of the spectrum. I would just say it's slightly more independent than the current setup. I wouldn't like to necessarily use the word libertarian.
To have any label and statement.
It sounds extreme though, right? Every new mindset, every new paradigm has its stages of adoption. Even blockchain used to be used only by early adopters and criminals and crazy IT guys, right? And now blockchain and technology and Bitcoin is used by corporations. And I think that the whole concept of building private communities from scratch, from ground up, a few years back was considered crazy because only some libertarians were building or taking over some oil rigs on the sea. But now it's getting more and more popular simply because the mass market, for the lack of a better word, the typical client, the typical resident, needs it more and more. Like I said, people living in big cities, they are healthy, they're wealthy, but they're also conscious. So they're using the wealth they created living in Western world in order to increase their consciousness, that they don't want to necessarily be so much sucked into this Western world. They want to live more closer to the nature. Now that they finally have the space and the time and the energy and the financial resources to do that.
Especially with the fact that they can, as you mentioned, work remotely from any place in the world.
Right.
So why not to work from your porch in a private city?
So, speaking of, it's funny, we just mentioned libertarians, and now we're going to the post-pandemic world. One of the few good things about the pandemic we have went through is that the world seemed to be more and more used to hybrid work or remote work. With the progress of technology, we're able to have fast internet almost everywhere in the world. And that allows us to move out of the towns. The urbanization is kind of even going backwards in a way, or slowing down at least. We don't have to live in a big city because 50 years ago, only big city could give you a good school, a pharmacy, and a hospital, and so on. Right now, you really don't need to live there in order to live a happy, healthy life.
And we're putting a point here, and of course we are inviting all of you, the viewers of Berlin Daily, to think about it and think such a sort of idea. And if you would like to live in a private city, and where. And again, thank you very much for watching our show. Good day to you. This is Poland Daily Culture. I'm Maria Kądzielska, and we're talking about startups and books. With me in the studio is Marek Zmysłowski, a businessman, but also an author of a book, Chasing a Black Unicorn. Marek, you talked about the fact that you spent a lot of time in Africa building from the scratch startups there, fighting with cunning business partners who wanted to put you in jail, and eventually writing a book about it. So my obvious question is, did you catch the black unicorn?
I've realized maybe I don't have to spend my life chasing them because it's very tiring. Obviously, the word unicorn refers to fast-growing online company that achieves a billion-dollar valuation. Indirectly, I've achieved it because Jumia, the company that has gone public that I was a part of, because I joined them as one of the first employees, did become a unicorn. But I've never created my own because it was a way for me to get mature as an entrepreneur. And chasing black unicorns really resembles the so-called rat race in a corporate world. Right? You have to find your own balance, and you have to find your own satisfaction in doing something that can be super small, but can give you satisfaction way bigger than chasing anything. So that was the premise of the book. Forgive me for those who have not read this, that I'm giving this out. Spoiler alert, right?
Well, I'm sure that is a very good later to take you through the story. So having all this experience based on Africa, right now you're building a private city in Dominican Republic, which sounds like a safer project, to be honest, and less crazy than the previous one.
Actually, yes.
So even though it is crazy itself, but also beautiful. How do you want to take all this experience which you had from Africa through the Dominican Republic?
I really do feel like everything that I've done before in my life prepared me for this adventure. So a couple of things. Yeah, a big part of my life I was in the IT world. I observed how big fortunes are being made in the IT sector, e-commerce sector. And I could see how the growth is happening, how the money is raised, how the sales is being done. Much, much different than how the real estate world used to work for hundreds of years. I also fell in love in real estate a few years back because I'm the co-founder of a Polish-Swedish solar roof company where we're basically building solar roofs on top of people's houses. And that's how I fell in love with the construction sector. And already in Sunroof, I saw how bringing certain habits, or best practices is the better word, in customer acquisition and fundraising can give us an edge in this very old school type of sector, which is real estate construction. And that worked very well. Sunroof became a very big company. We just sold the roof number 1,000 in I believe that was in Poland. When I got involved in the real estate project, a big real estate project in the Dominican Republic, I was not scared of Dominican Republic because I've done business in Poland and in Nigeria. And like I told you before, DR is way closer to Europe than to Africa. Then I have amazing business partners who have been in the real estate world for 30 years. But I was able to bring this fresh view, this rookie view, into the real estate world. That you can raise money to build an ambitious project in a totally different way, where you don't have to compromise on your vision. And you can sell the product by taking advantage of the internet space, which is really so obvious for us, but not so obvious when you talk to the real estate moguls around the world. And that fresh view and that fresh approach to fundraising
those
and
are
sales.
two fields of the market which we're talking here about. One is your experience from the IT, which is so craving for all innovations all the time and chasing it, and
sometimes even too much, right?
Sometimes even too much, as we're looking at the crypto market currently.
Yeah.
But the other field is the infrastructure and just building houses, which is usually very conservative.
Yeah, well, it has to be. Like, you don't want to experiment with the way a bridge is built because you're messing with people's lives, right?
Absolutely.
But there are many things that you can innovate. And I really believe that this is a great chance to bring that innovation the moment you have an expert from one field entering another field and trying to see what works.
It's also going to be a very safe place. This is an important part of it. The privacy.
Yeah, by definition, when you're building a community from scratch, security is one of your priorities. The good thing about Dominican Republic, it is actually a very safe country, but you have to know how to look at the statistics, because this is usually the paradox of the statistics. I'm going to give you an example. I was living in South Africa, and South Africa, it is a dangerous country, especially when you look at the statistics of the general population. But if you look at the statistics of tourists or expats, immigrants living in South Africa, South Africa is actually safer than Spain, because it's based on private cities. It's based on independent communities that have its own lifestyle and have its own security and so on. It's not a good thing that the world is becoming slowly a dangerous place, or maybe used to be dangerous, now it still is in certain parts of the world. But the thing is, the whole point of building a community from scratch is that you not only design lifestyle, well, you do design lifestyle, but part of this lifestyle is safety, so you can leave your door open and so on. So this is key. This is like so obvious we don't even talk about it, right? Because obviously it has to be taken care of.
Yeah, this is the main part, but of course the milestone, which is so important for many, that you invest something and you live in a safe place as well, and that's let's say for families, one of the most important things to look at. Well, the project sounds wonderful. We keep the fingers crossed.
Thank you so much.
And for you, the viewers of Poland Daily, I have two invitations. One is, of course, to check out the Samana Group and the private city in Dominicana, which is growing up. And maybe this will be the paradise, which the part of you will own as well. And the other invitation is to check out the book, Chasing a Black Unicorn, and think, what is your black unicorn? And thank you for watching our show. Welcome all of you, the viewers of Poland Daily Culture. My name is Marek Zmysłowski, and today we are talking about startups, investments, because with me in the studio is Marek Zmysłowski, an author of a book. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Your book is Chasing the Unicorns.
Chasing Black Unicorns.
Chasing Black Unicorns, even more, even more unique, let's say. And it's about these startups in Africa, which you have a very mainly, and you have we have a huge experience about this part of the world and this field. So first of all, tell us how, like a Polish businessman, ended up taking care of and running startups in Africa, and what sort of journey was it?
Well, how did it end up like this for me? It always starts with this looking like a coincidence, but then in hindsight, it looks like destiny. I started in so-called startups, which is a fast-growing but high-risk organization, usually in new technology sector. In my case, it was online travel and e-commerce in Poland. And then I got hired by an investment fund who at that time was looking to do some bold moves and bold investments into Africa. Because a few years back, when you look at Africa, you assumed the economy is growing, the country and the market, the countries and the markets will become more and more democratic, more and more capital-loving, more and more globalized. So in the end, the users will behave the same way as they behave in Europe and the US. So on that premise, you assume they're going to need their own version of Amazon, Uber, Booking.com, Expedia, and so on. So let's build those businesses before the big guys really want to come. That was our investment thesis. So I was responsible for building, let's just say, the African version of Expedia. And it was the adventure of my life. I moved there in 2014, and I've stayed in Nigeria first for 3.5 years. Company went public as a bigger e-commerce group together as Jumia Travel. And then I moved to Kenya. I also moved to South Africa. In general, I have collected experience running businesses, starting them from scratch, first in Europe, in Poland. So you can say the more bureaucratic, more organized type of market, but still very early when you compare to other Western European countries. But then in Nigeria, which is as crazy as it gets. So that gave me a good perspective, a wide perspective on how other markets will look like. And the two extreme types of experiences then really prepared me to Dominican Republic, which for me is like perfectly in the middle between Europe and Africa when it comes to development. It's still kind of crazy, right? But it has huge potential and it's way more organized than Africa, yes. And close to nature, yeah.
So, but definitely, well, I'd say Africa is also very close to nature, but it's sort of a risk. We're speaking here about Kenya, out of all of those three,
And Nigeria mainly, yes.
yes, seems the most, let's say, stable. The rest, it's like being sort of in a jungle where anything can happen to, like, lack of electricity, for example. So, what was the biggest challenge for you looking at this way? You needed also to be there such a long time, which is for a Polish person a totally different place to live.
Yeah, so I lived there full time between 2013 and 2018, if I remember correctly. And then obviously a few years later, after 2018 till 2022, I was like working part-time with this region. So I guess I got to know Sub-Saharan Africa pretty well. What can I say? None of the experience in Europe can prepare you for what Africa is preparing for you, simply because the types of challenges for a businessman are way different. I mean, even starting with infrastructure, right? When you build an e-commerce business in Europe, you can leverage the existing roads network. You can take advantage of the existing warehousing network or courier companies network. If you wanted to build an e-commerce website in 2013 in Nigeria, you also had to build your own courier company, and you also had to your own warehouse, because there was no existing well-developed infrastructure that you could build on top of. The type of client, although there are clients who have the money, the market is way more, what's the word, saturated? Not saturated is not. There's a big difference between the rich and the poor. So although, for example, Nigeria is a huge country, we're talking about almost 200 million people, there's only 2 million people who make more than $1,000 per month, right? So
That sounds crazy. So it's a huge gap.
Huge gap, right? So this also affects your ability to expand, and so on and so on. So very challenging, especially because the types of challenging are not
The one you
seen in
expect.
Europe. Exactly. So you can be experienced in Europe, you're still going to feel like a rookie in Africa.
Sounds crazy. So the question is, how do you end up writing a book about it?
So I always wanted to write a book, and I figured every time I find a problem, I want to tackle the problem by reading a lot about this problem. So when I was moving to Nigeria 10 years ago, actually that was already 10 years ago, I was looking for any possible book about running a business in Nigeria, and guess what? There was nothing, right? If someone wrote a book about Africa, I was some university professor trying to understand Africa, or some crazy guy driving his motorbike through the desert. There was no practical business books. So especially in IT, about IT or e-commerce. So I remember thinking, maybe I'll be the one that writes this. So I would write a series of blog posts or even articles for myself for years to come. And then I had one big problem in Africa when one of my business partners tried to basically put me to jail. He bribed the Nigerian police to put me to jail because he wanted to force me to sell him the company for free, which resulted in 2 years of me fighting for justice in courts. And I did win, although it was an extremely hard experience for me. But then I've realized my book just became way more interesting, because it's not just a boring book about building a website in Nigeria, but there's also some criminal aspects to it, simply because of my adventures with adventures, quote unquote, with the courts and with the police. So writing the book really gave me motivation to fight for justice in courts, because I knew that I have to win in order to have a happy end. So it was also like a therapy for me. Yeah.
Sounds crazy, but also very challenging. We'll talk about more in the next episode, but to all of you, the viewers of Poland Daily, it's a wonderful invitation. You have to pick up Chasing Black Unicorn of Marek Zmysłowski and read it. Type in the comment what you think about it. And again, thank you very much for watching our show. Welcome all of you, the viewers of Poland Daily Culture. My name is Maria Kądzielska, and we're talking about a private city in Dominicana. Would you like to live there? With me in the studio is the CEO of this project, Marek Zmysłowski. Again, thank you very much for showing up here.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit, because we are sort of sitting with the background of this beautiful place. Why Dominicana? Why Dominican Republic? And what this was this part of the world? Why this part of the world is unique to build there a private city?
Yeah, well, a few reasons. First, let's remember we're talking about building a private city, which really is more like a modern village than a classical aspect of a city. We're not going to have skyscrapers there and so on. It's a modern...
So you don't want to destroy Dominicana, just to make sure about
We're
it.
definitely living in harmony with nature. We want to sign up to the category of smart cities,
Okay.
But when you look at the category of smart cities, we want to be the most stupid city. I mean, we want to take advantage of technology, but we want to find a healthy balance between the best of the nature that has what it has to offer and what technology has to offer, right? I mean, the people thousands of years ago probably were more healthy than us, but at the same time, if they had a small scratch, they might have died out of infection. So
Exactly.
you want to balance this. Well, first of all, we're talking about private city, not private nation, right? We're not signing up to creating a total new nation from scratch. We just want to build a...
So you're not building a country?
No. We want to build a community from scratch, which is big enough that can sustain itself and finance also the growth of the infrastructure, because it's all about the numbers. Dominican Republic, why? Because, well, for starters, there are already 2 private cities in the Dominican Republic.
So they are used to it?
The government is used to it. The government likes it because the corporation that runs a private city pays taxes and hires a lot of people. Okay. So there's Punta Cana, there's Casa de Campo. So we are not bringing to this country anything super innovative. The government already likes this model and knows this model. We're just trying to build a different product. Punta Cana, it's a very well-known city in the world because a lot of tourists go there, more than 6 million people just to this city every year, but it's an all-inclusive type of resort town. If this is the McDonald's of tourism, we want to build the Whole Foods of tourism. Secondly, Dominican Republic is part of the Hispaniola island. It's an island that is big enough that you can find huge areas totally empty out of people, so you can feel like you are in the middle of nowhere. You can take advantage of the nature. But at the same time, the economy of this country is big enough that you, forgive me for the comparison, you don't have to get into the plane in order to get to the civilization, because it's a 11 million people country with a GDP per capita $8,500, which is as much as Poland 17 years ago when we entered the European Union. It's a country with balanced economy. They only have a 15% more or less from tourism. The rest is services, agriculture, industry, mining, and so on. So the country is more like small Brazil than any other Caribbean island that you probably consider very beautiful but not too developed. The country is very close to the east coast of US. It's a 2.5 hours flight from Miami, 3.5 hours flight from New York. So when we're speaking about this concrete jungle,
so it's actually anyone who lives in New York and is so fed up with skyscrapers.
It's a 2.5 hours flight, yeah, from New York, 3.5.
So it's let's say just very actually short flight when looking from
it's a weekend getaway.
American
exactly.
Weekend getaway.
It's like Spain for Polish people, right?
So you can have a house there as a second house, as a sort of summer house, or
correct. And if you're an American citizen or a Canadian citizen, and you're looking for a way to allocate your capital that is maybe outside the US finance system or tax system and so on, this is the closest country to the US that is not under the US influence. Because you cannot say the same about Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, or Panama. So it's a country that is big enough to sustain a nice economy, but at the same time small enough without any oil resources. They're not going to be any wars. No one's going to fight for this country. So the probability of war is actually super low. So
it's reasons, a long-sustaining a long-sustaining safety place for investment.
Correct. And at the same time, it's the second fastest growing economy in the whole Latin America. So for many reasons, it's an interesting country. And the government historically, when you look at the last 50 years of the history of the government, always respected democracy, always respected capitalism, which is also a very important factor for any investor that is seeking for stability. And this is a very stable country when you're looking at the politics, especially when you consider this in comparison to the whole region, the whole Latin American region.
Well, sounds wonderful. And what is left for us is, of course, to invite you, the viewers of Poland Daily, to think about such a private city and think about your investment if you are looking for a summer house. Dominican Republic sounds absolutely wonderful. And thank you for watching. Good day to you. My name is Marek Zmysłowski and this is Poland Daily Culture. We're talking about private cities and investment. With me in the studio is Marek Zmysłowski, the CEO of Samana Group. Thank you very much for showing up here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And we, almost imported you from Dominican Republic because you are building there a private city with beautiful, amazing houses with every one of them with pools, with gardens, like basically living in the garden. So it looks like a paradise. Well, and whenever I picturize myself in a paradise, it looks like this exactly.
Close.
So in this nature where you are away from concrete jungle, but in real jungle, which is green, beautiful, but also, well, not totally away from where, let's say, civilization. And this is a fantastic project. You are right now, well, at the beginning of it, because you have some of the buildings,
Yes.
but you're trying to make it bigger and to create all facilities.
Yeah.
Tell me, please, how do you see this project in 5, like say 2, 5, 10 years?
Yeah.
Where do you want to go? How do you want to develop it?
Yeah, so let me start with the 10-year vision.
Yes.
Right? We're looking at building a community of around 10,000 residents. Let's say 60-70% of them living there 3 months a year, maybe more. The rest are more short-term stays. It's important to keep the balance between the residents and the tourists for the health of the community, and also with at least 10 to 20% of the local community, so we have a nice blend. In 10 years from now, we want to have a 10,000 residents community, because that number is important. This is the community big enough that can financially sustain itself. If you want to build a project ecologically sustainable, you have to remember it has to be financially sustainable. Otherwise, you're just going to be asking for money all the time. So that's the 10-year plan. The number is super important
So
to
you
keep the
sort of
infrastructure.
want to be independent in the many ways, in this
we're talking about-
self-sustainable.
Yes, in order to invest in technology that allows you to be sustainable ecologically, that technology is not cheap. You need to find enough people who are willing to pay more to live in such an environment. You need to have enough conscious clients, residents, and you need to have a community of at least a few thousand people. The 10,000 is the perfect mark, where you can make enough money from managing the town to invest in water treatment plant, to invest in sewage filtering plant, and so on and so on. So all those additional infrastructure costs that usually are provided by the city if you live in a city, but now we have to build them from scratch. So the
But
size is important.
Looking at this perspective, as I hear, you also want to sort of bring the investors to sustain the country. I mean, this paradise with this investment, and with the people who want to live there, they will take care of this nature of this place. So sort of take care of the beauty of it.
Correct, and it starts with not building too much. We're not developing more than 20% of the land, and we keep 80% of biologically active, which is the total opposite of typical developments where they develop 80% and they keep 20%.
Biology active. Let's talk about this phrase. What does it really
That
mean?
basically means leaving the forest the way it is, building around trees, not cutting them,
Okay.
having a lake in the middle of a condominium. But you asked about the timeline. So the 10-year plan is the long-term plan. We have to get to that growth stage, to that size, so we become financially stable as an organization that runs the community. Because that's the problem. You have to be big enough to be able to be sustainable. Usually big companies become greedy. That's what we want to change. Do not become more greedy as you grow. Going earlier, in 5 years from now, that's our mark where we want to go public. Because we believe that in order not to become greedy as a big organization, we need to finance ourselves with as many smaller investors as possible who are not investing in us just to make money, but who are investing in us so we build an amazing place for them to live in. That's the problem of real estate developments across the world. They all look the same because they all are financed by the same organizations, so-called the old money. That's why we want to go earlier public, so we can earlier tap into the retail investor who might invest in us not simply for the profit, but also for other positive aspects when it comes to community, nature, and so on. Now, in 2 years from now, because obviously this is a multi-stage project, we will have finished our first stage of development, which is going to be an early adopter community, if you may say it like this. We're talking about 120, 150 flats, which is a community which is big enough to sustain a few restaurants, a shop, a pharmacy close by, like an entry stage, first stage of development of the bigger city. That's where we're going to be in 18 months from now, to be exact. So 120 to 150 ready flats to move in for people, including the necessary infrastructure to have a nice life when you live there a couple months per year. So sports center, restaurants, and so on.
Well, sounds wonderful. Just wrap up this episode. Who are you inviting to this project in this case? Do you want it to be a multi-international community? And who are, like, let's say, your main target? Is it US or is it Canada?
Well, before I go into demographics, we are looking for people investors who either want to invest in a project or want to invest in real estate, that want to be a part of a project that cares about making money as much as about living in harmony with nature. We treat these two goals almost evenly. Not almost evenly. We treat those two goals evenly. Obviously, the most convenient location of what we're building is for the people living on the east coast of the United States, simply because if they build a house there or invest there, they can go there every weekend. That doesn't say anyone from Europe cannot invest in our project. Like I said, either become a developer with us, investor in the holding, or simply buy a flat or a house or a plot of land from us. It just is slightly further, so I don't recommend this if you want to have a weekend getaway spot. But if you can travel somewhere once per month or live in 2 places in a year or in 3, then this is perfect for you as well.
But what is left for me is to make an invitation to all of you, the viewers of Pelham Daily Culture, to think about and check out the Samana Group and the private city in Dominican Republic, because it sounds amazing. And thank you for watching our show.